Any ideas how Amazon MMO beta game is killing GPUs? Obviously, we're both aware of this story. I haven't really looked into it. Haven't had time for one, and I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to make of this story. What do you think, Tim?
I found it interesting, a lot of the discussion around that it's Amazon's fault for this. Like, Amazon has managed to code this GPU killing software, and that, they're to blame for making a virus. I mean, again, I don't have the full story, so I don't really know exactly what's going on. So let's just preface that for start before getting into this. But if a GPU is blowing up, like the VRM is blowing up, or the GPU has been running too high power and is dead, then that's the fault of the GPU, generally speaking, because the GPU has built-in protections. Like, a GPU is not generally allowed to run at like 1,000 watts, which may happen if there's no protection, circuitry and things put into the firmware and all that sort of thing. So GPUs are built so that you can't just run a program and blow it up. And same with CPUs. You can't just run whatever you want and just blow the CPU up, because that would be disastrous, not just for users, but just imagine the viruses that people would make for computers. You could just be like, I don't want, rival company developing software, so I'll just send them this virus that just blows up their CPU or GPU because they've got no protection software involved. So this is most likely to be a situation where whether it's the 3090 entirely, or whether it's a certain brand's 3090 GPUs, or whatever the situation is, it's likely that the cause is some fault of the protection mechanism or some issue there that is allowing the GPU to be run out of spec in this certain workload, and the protection mechanisms aren't catching it, or potentially the VRM is supposed to run at a certain level and hasn't quite been built to that level. Something around that is likely to be causing this sort of issue. And it's just unfortunate that this particular game is doing something. Maybe it's running at a ridiculously high uncapped frame rate in a menu or something, and that's a really edge case scenario where the GPU can't really cope with that super well. Again, I think that's likely going to be the cause. I expect they'll update the game so that it doesn't happen, just to be on the safe side. But yeah, be interesting to see what the conclusion is once people look into it, because I wouldn't be surprised to see some sort of hardware fault. Especially when we remember back at the launch of like the 3080s and 3090s, there were issues with the
POS caps.
Yeah, and
is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, and they had to like slightly downclock the GPUs or something like that to get them running stably. I wonder if there's any correlation there between those two issues. It'd be interesting to look into that.
They basically had to stabilize the frequency steps, how much it's boosting all over the place. They had to smooth that out to achieve stability. Who knows? Like, again, we didn't report on that until we spent, I can't remember how long it was now, but I think it was weeks speaking to AIBs, investigating ourselves, looking at user feedback and trying to work out what was going on. And in the end, we ended up getting it right. We're not going to make a video about this because we have no idea. All we're going to do is add to the confusion and possibly get it completely wrong. So unfortunately, we're not in a position where we can really test it out either. How much do you learn from blowing up a 3090 when other people you look at it once and you're okay, we've blown that up, but does that tell us anything? It's a sample of one. Like, that's not a you need to be blowing up like a lot of 3090s and trying to blow up other cards and all that sort of thing, which again becomes a very costly exercise and all that. So yeah, it'd be interesting to hear what the conclusion is to that, whether there were certain batches or something like that where the components that they'd use, it might not even be the fault of whatever brand it is. Maybe they got a bad batch of components that they were relying on, or something like that, and this very niche edge case thing pushed the power up. It might have been like a tiny spike or something, just pushed it well above its limits, and that was that. So yeah, I'm not sure where that will go. Maybe by the time this Q&A is actually released, we'll have a bit more information on that. But yeah, it's certainly interesting to see stuff like that happen when it really shouldn't.